The views and opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Open Sky Radio. Please be advised.
Good day, everybody. Welcome to The Fire You Can't Put Out. With you, as always, my name is Melvin, and I want to thank you for joining me. Today we are taping episode number 48. We turn 1 year old as of next week. Today, just to give you some point of reference, we are taping on Saturday the 21st, December 21st, 2013. And I wanted to record earlier this week. I generally record midweek or late in the week and then get it out on Saturday, but work was quite a bit this week, and then Christmas shopping and all the rest, and man alive, am I just glad to be here on this microphone. So I've got quite a bit of things that I want to get to. Thank you for being here. Let's start with tax and spend, John Boehner. Alright, so let me give you some background. Congress has gone home. The Patty Murray, Paul Ryan budget passed the House, and then it passed the Senate, and that's it. They're all gone home now. After they passed the budget, the 2-year budget in the House, John Boehner was giving a press conference, and he exploded at the press conference. There's quite a bit of video out there if you can find it, because he's clearly annoyed, not necessarily at the press corps themselves, but he blames outside groups. Back in 2009, after President Obama was elected, the Republicans met in the Caucus Room restaurant, and they said that they were going to show unyielding opposition and stop everything that was on the president's agenda over the next 4 years. We covered that story at length here on TFYCPO. And then after he was reelected in 2012, they met again. Only this time they didn't tell anyone where they were meeting. They didn't hold it at the Caucus Room restaurant in Washington, D.C. again. It was private, and nobody really knows who was there. And they said, fine, we weren't able to shut down the president's agenda. We're going to shut down the United States government. Quite a few Tea Party members over the year made a lot of statements about how they wanted to shut down the government. And they asked their Tea Party supporters about it, and the Tea Party was absolutely all about shutting down the U.S. government. So when it came time to raise the debt ceiling and all the rest, they decided no, that's not what they were going to do, and they did it. In October of this year, they shut down the government for 3 weeks. And they said that they wanted to do it to stop Obamacare, which was an affront to freedom and all these other things. And then, of course, they lost, and the government opened back up, and Obamacare is still there. They wasted 3 weeks that they could have been taking apart the president's, the ACA, because the rollout wasn't all that great. But they spent those 3 weeks shutting down the government, which took all of the focus off of the ACA and allowed some of the ACA's problems to be taken care of. So the government was reopened on October 17th, and Boehner was asked about it in this last week. Tea Party Patriots group, one of the largest of the hundreds of right-wing factions claiming the Tea Party mantle, lashed out at Representative John Boehner. According to the Hill blog, the groups are furious with the House Speaker for daring to speak out against conservatives that are paralyzing Congress and portions of the United States government. Boehner said, quote, they're using our members, this was at the press conference, they're using our members and they're using the American people for their own goals. This is ridiculous. Listen, if you're for more deficit reduction, you're for this agreement. Talking about the budget that was just passed. The Hill reported on a particularly angry fundraising letter that was sent out by the Tea Party Patriots referring to Boehner. Boehner, they wrote, has declared war on the Tea Party with his smug and pretentious rant. The last time we checked, we are the American people, quote unquote. The speaker is a ruling class politician, the letter said, who is really just another, wait for it, tax and spend liberal. The deal and Boehner's actions, they said, amount to an out-and-out betrayal of the American people. This is good news for those of us on the left side of the aisle, because there is a war officially going on inside the GOP, and we are walking into an election year in 2014, and so for the time being, we're gonna sit pretty. Alright, so Paul Ryan, after the budget was passed, the budget that he put together with Patty Murray was passed, made a statement on Fox News Sunday, and he says, "We are a caucus," quote, "along with our Senate counterparts, and we're going to meet and discuss what it is we're going to want out of the debt limit. We don't want nothing out of this debt limit. We're going to decide what it is, and we're going to accomplish something out of this debt limit fight." Ryan said the party will make up its mind on its list of demands at an upcoming retreat. Quote, "We're going to meet in the retreats after the holidays and discuss exactly what it is we're going to try to get for this," he said. So here's what just happened. They just passed a budget. They got together and they passed a budget that had some things from the left side of the aisle, some things from the right side of the aisle, and now Paul Ryan has said, we're not going to pay for any of it. That's what the debt limit does. The debt limit is a very deceiving name. It essentially just pays for what Congress has already passed. Congress just passed a 2-year budget, and Paul Ryan has said, now we're not going to pay for it unless the president gives us something. U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew said at the Wall Street Journal CEO forum last month, quote, "The right answer is they should just extend the debt limit way in advance and not have any sense of crisis at all. I hope that will happen. You know, they set February 7th as the day when the debt limit expires. We do have extraordinary measures that last about a month after that. So yeah, we do have a little bit of time." He's saying, look, you passed the budget. Just pay for it. Don't even pretend that there's going to be another debt limit fight, because it's going to erode the already weak confidence that is in the economy. The world really, we're looking at another credit down rating in America. We're looking at a country that's not entirely sure what's going to happen with its financial sector. And if we don't raise the debt limit, we will collapse the economy absolutely outright. Now, Paul Ryan is probably just saying this because it's red meat for his base. His base wants to hear that there's going to be a fight. His base wants to hear that the government is going to shut down. His base wants to hear him fighting and wants to see him baring his teeth. And so that's essentially what he's doing right now. So I can't blame him for that. But I really hope, for his sake and for all of our sake, that they're not actually considering another debt limit fight. We will see after the holidays. So this comes to us from Reuters on December 13th. Continental Resources. This is good news. I consider it. One of the companies that is committed to ship crude on the TransCanada Corporation's proposed Keystone XL pipeline now says that the pipeline is no longer needed. You heard that right. This thing has been in contention for years. Continental had signed up to ship some 35,000 barrels of its own oil from the Bakken Field of North Dakota on the 1,179-mile, $5.4 billion Keystone XL pipeline. But, of course, construction of the pipeline has been delayed for years as TransCanada, by the way, who is building this thing, TransCanada, not American Jobs, has sought regulatory approvals, and Continental has since turned to railroads to move its crude to oil refineries. Harold Hamm, chief executive of the independent oil producer, told Reuters that his company and the U.S. oil industry in general are no longer counting on Keystone XL. When asked whether Keystone XL is still needed, Ham said, "Not for our crude." And is it needed for the industry? I don't think so. Not in the U.S. Keystone XL's developer, Canadian pipeline giant TransCanada, said the line still has broad support, and there is a waiting list of customers interested in securing capacity on the line. Keystone XL should be operational 2 years after TransCanada receives a U.S. permit to complete it. And, of course, this is one of those things that's sitting on the president's desk right now that he is taking into consideration. The president is listening to the American people. He is listening to environmental groups. He is listening to people inside of his own White House. And he's deciding what he's going to do because he does get final say on this. This is one of those law enforcement things that the president actually does, and one of the things that that actually rests upon his shoulders. But with companies starting to back out of it, I'm hoping that it helps weigh the president's decision in the direction of not building the Keystone XL pipeline. Now, part of it has already been built. A southern portion, of the Keystone Network, known as the Gulf Coast Project, from Oklahoma to the Texas Gulf Coast, has already been built and is expected to begin operating next month. Unlike the international Keystone XL line that didn't require a U.S. State Department permit. Okay, we reported last week, or the week before, on the securitizing of rental properties now, which is essentially what's happening because they can't securitize mortgages, which is, of course, how they crashed the economy the first time, because of all the empty houses, all the foreclosures, all the people that don't have a place to live. So all those people that lost their homes became renters. And so now banks have decided that they're going to go ahead and start placing bets again, selling derivatives, and backing those derivatives with rentals. I reported that last week, and I also talked about the potential crash of 2016, which could come out of that. I felt a little bad after I got off the air with that story, because it's a really scary thing walking into another year and thinking about the fact that a crash is going to happen. But this is good news right here. It's called the Volcker Rule. And what blows my mind about this story is it's not being reported anywhere. This comes to us from CNN.com. The 5 federal agencies have approved the regulation known as the Volcker Rule on Tuesday. Although the outline of the rule was set out in the Dodd-Frank financial reform more than 3 years ago, of course, following the collapse, financial executives, lobbyists, and reform advocates have been anxiously awaiting the full text. So has this reporter right here. It's called the Volcker Rule because it's named for former Fed Chairman Paul Volcker. Ed Mierzwinski, Consumer Program Director for the U.S. Public Interest Research Group, said the final rule was stronger than a previous draft version and, follow me here, stronger than the rule that the banks wanted. Okay? The rule restricts banks with federally insured deposits from engaging in risky investment activities undertaken for their own benefit, a practice known as proprietary trading, as well as from taking ownership stakes in hedge funds and private equity firms. Big banks have shrugged off the Volcker Rule. Banks have called for the rule to protect market making in which firms hold securities to facilitate customer transactions. They also want to preserve their ability to trade for the purpose of hedging, offsetting risks everywhere. Most major banks have already shut down their proprietary trading desks, which functioned like internal hedge funds. The rule says that in order to demonstrate they are engaged in market making and not speculation, which was, of course, what led to the crash, banks have to show their trades are based on the, quote, reasonably expected near-term demands, unquote, of customers, taking into account current market conditions and historic demand. The proposal has generated furious lobbying from advocacy groups and big spending Wall Street firms over the past few years. Regulators have received over 18,000 comment letters on the subject, among the highest for any provision of the Dodd-Frank bill. Today's finalization of the Volcker Rule ban on proprietary trading is a major defeat for Wall Street and a direct attack of the high-risk, quick-buck culture of Wall Street, Better Markets President Dennis Keller said. So, yeah, they're doing securitizing again, and of course, with the Volcker Rule being out there, they're fighting to not have to follow the Volcker Rule. They're already trying to find ways around it, but it's good news because I've always said we're walking right into another crash, and the reason we are is because we didn't change any of the things that led to the first crash. Well, the Volcker Rule changed some of those things. So this is good news for the rest of us. And as I said, it blew my mind. It wasn't reported really anywhere by anybody. I had to do a little digging to find it myself. So with the economy rebuilding again, more people going back to work, homes beginning to sell again, we really should be much more robust than we are now. Our economy should be going gangbusters. Now, you ask just about anybody, and they will shake their fists and scream about Obama. But if you ask an economist will tell you what's actually going on. This comes to us courtesy of Christopher Rugaber at AP. The growing gap between the richest Americans and everyone else is what's hurting the U.S. economy. That's exactly what they've come to. So says a majority of more than 3 dozen economists surveyed last week by the Associated Press. A key source of the economist concern, higher pay and outsized stock market gains that are flowing mainly to affluent Americans. Yet these households spend less of their money than do low and middle income consumers who make up most of the population but whose pay is barely rising. This brings us, of course, to the fight for 15 to raise the minimum wage right now, which, of course, in the House and Senate, the federal House and Senate, is essentially the fight for 10-10. What you want is a broader spending base, said Scott Brown, chief economist at Raymond James, a financial advisory firm. You want more people spending money. Spending by wealthier Americans giving the weight of their dollars does help drive the economy, but analysts say the economy would be better able to sustain its growth if the riches were more evenly dispersed. Ladies and gentlemen, did you hear that? It almost sounds like they're talking about redistribution of wealth. I will pause for a minute and let right-wing heads explode. Okay, so the broader the improvement, the more likely it will be sustained, said Michael Namara, chief economist at the International Council of Shopping Centers. The most recent census figures show that the average income for the wealthiest 5% of U.S. households, adjusted for inflation, has surged 17% in the past 20 years. By contrast, average income in the middle 20% of households has risen less than 5%. So what they're saying is what anybody who knows anything about economics will tell you, is that if you get money into the hands of regular people, like myself, my wife, my friends, I don't know any really, really wealthy people. If you get the money into our hands, we will spend it. If you give it to the wealthy, which is what the conservatives are pushing for right now, they're just going to throw it on the pile. Among the economists' other views, the economic recovery, which officially began 4.5 years ago, has yet to reach its high point, and nearly all think the next recession is at least 3 years away, 2013, 2016. Half think it's at least 5 years away. The stock market isn't in a bubble. This is where I initially disagreed with them, but as I follow on, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average reached record highs earlier this year, most economists say that higher profits largely justified those gains. So, okay, it's not a bubble. And, of course, President Obama did give a speech this month about inequality being the defining challenge of our time. So it is on the American consciousness. Brown, the Raymond James economist, says analysts used to debate whether inequality was worsening. Now he says there's not much denial of that, and you're starting to see some of that research saying, yeah, it does slow the economy. So with inequality out there, and Pope Francis has been talking about inequality, of course. He's also been talking about rampant vulture capitalism. And he made the comment last week or the week before that it makes the news when the Dow Jones goes up 2 points or down 2 points, but it doesn't when somebody dies from exposure. And that got me thinking, is that happening this year? It's been pretty cold just about anywhere. If you were watching any of the games, any of the football games 2 weeks ago, there were quite a few NFL teams that were actually playing in the snow. And I said, well, with it being cold everywhere, are people dying of exposure? Meet Joe White, a 50-year-old California man described by his relatives as a loving father and doting grandfather. White had been living on the streets of Hayward for years. He wanted to work and was able to find odd jobs here and there, but it was never much or consistent enough to afford a place to live. Hayward has no emergency shelter with beds for single men, so he slept outside. Things were looking up until last Saturday. White was second on a long list to get permanent supportive housing in Hayward. He had been waiting in line for months, and it seemed as though he might finally catch a break. Joe White died on Sunday. Temperatures in the Bay Area plummeted to near freezing on December 10th, an uncommon occurrence in a region generally known for its lack of inclement weather. White's body was found in the old Hayward City Hall courtyard. He had been beaten up and robbed by multiple men who took the new winter coat White's sister had given him on Friday. He was wearing just a hoodie and shorts. His cause of death is still being determined, but police speculated that his death is weather-related. White is now the 7th homeless person in the Bay Area to die in the cold since November 28th. The others were Daniel Brilhart, 52, Enrique Rubio, 56, Andrew Greenlee, 48, Daniel Moore, 53, and 2 men in the East Bay and Peninsula whose names have not been released yet. According to the National Coalition for the Homeless, approximately 700 homeless people die from hypothermia every year. People were shocked by the death, but here's the thing. We live in a society that leaves many people too poor to survive, but is surprised to see them die. Yeah, he actually froze to death. And so it is happening. And as much as a lot of folks like to rail against he's lazy, he doesn't want to get a job and all the rest, and, let's give more tax breaks to the wealthy. It's what's happened in the Bay Area is there's been an explosion of wealth that has come as a result of all the tech jobs that are in the area. Tech jobs tend to pay pretty well. And so the cost of housing has just gone through the roof, which has priced people like Mr. White right out of the market and really left him with no place to work. And now he, along with a lot of others, has frozen to death on the streets of the Bay Area. It's pretty sad. All right. As I said, I wanted to cover that because, yeah, it's happening. And it's pretty cold in the area where I'm at. But in the area I'm at, they're more compassionate and they open up warming centers. It always seems that in the wealthier areas, they just pretend that the problem isn't there. So we did get some good news this week. U.S. District Court Judge Richard Leon ruled Monday that the NSA's phone surveillance program was likely a violation of the Fourth Amendment, which protects individuals against unreasonable searches and seizures. This is good news. In a statement distributed by journalist Glenn Greenwald and published in the New York Times, Snowden predicted Leon's ruling would be the first of many. And, of course, we are talking about Edward Snowden, who is essentially, well, he's been proven right. Quote, I acted on my belief that the NSA's mass surveillance programs would not withstand a constitutional challenge, and that the American people deserved a chance to see these issues determined by open courts, Snowden said. Today, a secret program authorized by a secret court was exposed to the light of day, found to violate America's rights, and it is the first of many. The program in question, of course, was first unveiled by Snowden in June. And Snowden, right at this point right now, is trying to get out of Russia. The president was asked about the NSA program, and he made what I feel like is a very fair point. He says, of course, the NSA is essentially just collecting all this metadata. Okay, they're not actually sitting around listening to everybody's phone calls, boyfriend, girlfriends talking and all the rest. They're collecting all this metadata and they're looking for key terms and things of that nature. And when they find those things, then they investigate those calls. So he was asked at a press conference, well, you're spying on Americans, you're collecting all this information. He says, look, we're trying to catch terrorists. Now, this isn't a quote. Excuse me, this isn't a quote. This isn't verbatim. This is, I'm just kind of describing what he said. He said, we're trying to catch the terrorists, okay? That's what we're trying to do, trying to keep Americans safe. He says, and we're catching heat for that. He says, but if we had a terrorist attack, then the press would be tearing us down for that. Why didn't you see this coming? Why weren't you paying attention? Blah, de blah, de blah. So it's really, you can't win, All right. So, more good news. After 18 months, an Iowa investigation finds voter fraud is at less than 1%. How far below 1%? Of course, voter fraud is what's being screamed from a lot of conservative rooftops right now. They're saying the voter fraud is out there, it exists, and all these people are voting, and they're voting fraudulently, and they should be thrown in prison, you know what? Better than that, let's just not let them vote in the first place. And so they've been pushing a lot of voter ID laws, stopping voting on Sunday, stopping early voting, same-day registration, and all these other things. After 18 months and repeated insistence by top officials that voter fraud is rampant, Iowa's voter fraud investigation has essentially gone nowhere. The Des Moines Register reported Monday that the investigation, which has a cost of about $150,000 so far, has unearthed a total of 16 cases for criminal prosecution. 5 of these cases have been dismissed, while 5 others have resulted in guilty pleas. 3 guilty pleas were submitted by felons who thought their voting rights had been automatically restored upon getting out of prison, as they would have been before a 2011 executive order by Republican Governor Terry Branstad. Branstad claimed last year that many Iowans falsely vote in the area where they are not eligible, while pushing for a voter ID law that makes voting disproportionately harder for people who are, follow me, poor, non-white, and elderly. Secretary of State Matt Stoltz, another Republican who spearheaded the investigation, has also long argued that the state has a voter fraud problem. He told the Des Moines Register that the 16 cases, which account for 0.00075% of Iowa's registered voters, proves that voter fraud exists. Now, Iowa's not the only state doing this. Ohio did it, and in Ohio we found out that they were given bad instructions by poll workers. Colorado has also found a handful of potential perpetrators of voter fraud, many of whom ended up being legitimate voters. An independent investigation in Arizona found 34 cases of mostly misinformed illegal voters over 8 years. A Florida hunt for illegitimate voters turned up a single non-citizen voter from Canada, and that's it. And we need these voter, I wouldn't call 0.00075% rampant, and I would say that even if those 16 people got to vote fraudulently, it's not going to flip an election. Let's be frank here. The voter ID laws are about, as the article said, keeping the poor, keeping minorities, keeping students, anybody that might potentially vote Democratic, because the demographics are changing and the Republicans are looking less and less likely to win. More and more of the millennials are starting to subscribe to the idea that gays and lesbians deserve the same rights as every other law-abiding American, and that is absolutely too radical for some factions of the Republican Party, namely the Tea Party. And you can't win when you're talking about discriminating against other people. Let us stick with equality for a bit. So President Barack Obama on Tuesday announced his delegates to the 2014 Winter Olympic Games in Sochi, Russia. And what may be a thumb in the eye to Russian President Vladimir Putin over his crackdown on gay rights, 2 of Obama's delegates are openly gay. Billie Jean King, the tennis legend, and Caitlin Cahow, an Olympic medalist in women's ice hockey, are both part of the U.S. delegation, and both are out lesbians. Another member of the U.S. delegation, figure skating Olympic medalist Brian Boitano, routinely declines to answer questions about his sexuality, saying that, quote, everyone's got their own path to discovering who they are. That was earlier this week, and then on Thursday he came out. Brian Boitano came out as gay, and so that makes 3. There were quite a few other delegates sent over there, but see, what may be another slight to the Russian President Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, and First Lady Michelle Obama will not attend the opening ceremony. This marks the first time since the 2000 Summer Olympic Games that a president, vice president, first lady, or former president won't be part of the opening ceremony. Over the summer, Putin signed a law banning the adoption of Russian-born children to gay couples. He also signed a law that bans public discussion of gay rights and relationships where children might hear it. Under that law, which considers such talk propaganda, violators can be fined and foreigners can be deported. Putin is a darling to the American right now for the way that he is treating our gay brothers and sisters over in Russia. And of course, hate speech has quite a haven over there. Meet Ivan Oklobistin. He is a priest and actor who stars in Russia's version of Scrubs and voiced the character in 2012's Snow Queen. On Sunday, he made homophobic statements during a spiritual talk in Siberia's Novosibirsk. According to the Hollywood Reporter, quote, he's talking about gay people, I would have them all stuffed alive into an oven. This is Sodom and Gomorrah. As a believer, I cannot remain indifferent to this. It is a living danger to my children, unquote, he said to the Huffington Post, which was a translation of a local news report from NGS Novosti. So, of course, it's a translation. Quote, I don't want my children thinking that being a... He used the F word for gay man. I'm not going to say it. He continued, this is gay fascism. If a man cannot choose an appropriate person of the opposite sex for reproduction, that is a clear sign of mental abnormality, and he needs to be deprived of the right to choose. After news of his vitriolic anti-gay comments made headlines around the world, he took to Twitter to defend himself, and he showed no remorse. Quote, the meaning was rendered correctly, he said, per The Guardian. Everyone has the right to express their opinion. So he's saying, yes, I did say that. I did say that gay people should be stuffed into ovens while they are alive. We've got a little bit more on the fight for gay rights in Russia here in a little bit, but I want to say real quick, good on you, President Obama. Absolutely stellar. I mean, just sending the gay delegates over there is just going to make Putin's head spin. And then, of course, the president, the vice president, the first lady. No, not going over there. Yeah, that's awesome. Well played, Mr. Obama. Well played. This was a huge week for equality in the United States. Let's welcome Utah and New Mexico. Follow me. Elisa Knoll rushed to the county clerk's office with her partner immediately after learning that a federal judge overturned Utah's ban on gay marriage. They waited in line for a wedding license and were married in an impromptu ceremony punctuated with Noel giving the officiant a high five. I can't believe this is Utah, she said. Others had a similar reaction after a ruling by U.S. District Judge Robert J. Shelby that declared Utah's voter-approved ban on gay marriage unconstitutional. The recent appointee by President Obama said the ban violates the constitutional rights of gay couples and ruled Utah failed to show that allowing same-sex couples would affect opposite-sex couples in any way. The ruling prompted a frenzy of activity by lawyers and gay couples. Of course, they're trying to get it overturned. The Republican governor blasted it. Here's the thing, and of course, the Senate rules were recently changed so that Obama can get more of his judges approved by a majority of Congress. You know, democracy. And this is one of President Obama's choices. They now have marriage equality in Utah because of the judge that President Obama picked. If you want to get mad at Obama, and this is a stupid thing to get mad about, by the way, because if you're getting mad at him about this, of course, you're for discrimination. But if you want to get mad at the president about something that he's doing, like you get, oh my God, it's raining outside. Freaking Obama, he just, or whatever else you blame him for. This is one of the things he actually does. He picks judges, and then those judges go back to the states because, of course, he appoints the federal judges in states. And then they do things like this, giving people equal rights. Darn him. To New Mexico. The New Mexico Supreme Court declared same-sex marriage unconstitutional in a ban on same-sex marriage unconstitutional in a Thursday ruling. Prohibiting same-gender marriages is not substantially related to the, this is from the ruling, is not substantially related to the governmental interest advanced by the parties opposing same-gender marriage or to the purposes we have identified. Therefore, barring individuals from marrying and depriving them of the rights, protections, and responsibilities of civil marriage solely because of their sexual orientation violates the Equal Protection Clause under Article 2, Section 18 of the New Mexico Constitution. We hold that the state of New Mexico is constitutionally required to allow same-gender couples to marry and must extend them the rights, protections, and responsibilities that derive from civil marriage under New Mexico law. Welcome, New Mexico. That one didn't surprise me. Welcome, Utah. That one did surprise me. Welcome to the party. Okay, sticking with the good news. We reported about a high school in Florida named for the Grand Wizard of the KKK back in 1959. The Nathan Bedford Forrest High School in Jacksonville was named after the first Grand Wizard of the white supremacist group, who was also a former slave trader and general in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. In 2007 and 2008, the school board voted against changing the school's name. Each time the vote split along color lines, according to NPR. Coupled with the changing demographics, the effort to rename the school picked up momentum this year when a local resident named Amalteo Richmond created an online petition. That online petition got 160,000 signatures on Monday, and the school board voted unanimously to change the name of the high school before the start of the 2014 school year. So I remember reading about this a while ago and didn't think that it was going to happen. And so good on you. Good on you to the Florida School Board. And to this gentleman, Amateo Richmond, for working so hard getting the name changed. And, of course, to everybody who signed the petition, thank you. It's going to be nice to put a little bit more of the racism that this country has been identified with. It's going to be nice to put some of that away. All right. So equality this week has really, really taken a front seat. I'm enjoying doing this week's show because there is so much good news that has happened with respect to equality this week. But then this happened. I wasn't going to report on this, or if I initially wanted to, but when I found out how many other people were already covering it, I started thinking maybe I don't want to cover it, because I try to cover, like I've said, I try to cover the things on this show that aren't getting a lot of play out there in the media. But I have to say something about this. I have to say a number of things about this. Phil Robertson, who is the star of the show Duck Dynasty, which I don't watch. I've never watched and will never watch, gave an interview to GQ magazine. And the star of Duck Dynasty said, quote, "Start with homosexual behavior and just morph out from there. Bestiality, sleeping around with a woman and that woman and that woman and those men." Robertson said, before paraphrasing a Bible verse, "Don't be deceived. Neither the adulterers, the idolaters, the male prostitutes, the homosexual offenders, the greedy, the drunkards, the slanderers, the swindlers, they won't inherit the kingdom of God. Don't deceive yourself. It's not right." All you got to do is look at where there is a society with no Jesus. I'll give you 4. The Nazis, no Jesus. Actually, I'm going to take this point by point. The Nazis did have Jesus. They practiced a religion called positive Christianity, but he wouldn't know that. Look at their record. The Shintos, they started this thing in Pearl Harbor. Any Jesus among them? Nope. Communists? Nope. Islamists? Nope. Zero. Well, okay. Actually, he's just ignorant. That's 80 years of ideologues that have popped up, and there was no Jesus. No Jesus was allowed among any of those 4 groups. And just look at the records as far as this murder goes. And blah, 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 blah. Robertson also shared his view that gay men are not logical. Quote, "It seems to me a vagina, as a man, would be more desirable than a man's anus. That's just me. I'm just thinking there's more there. She's got more to offer. I mean, come on, dudes." I'm quoting here, and I'm having a really hard time. You know what I'm saying? But hey, sin, it's not logical, my man. It's just not logical. Okay. All right. So anuses. I bet you didn't think you were going to hear that word on the show this week. He says, think about the anus. Like, wouldn't you have rather a vagina? So, Mr. Robertson seems to have a problem with gay sex. And that problem seems to be that he thinks too much about it. When I fell in love with my wife, I wasn't thinking, my goodness, I can't wait to play with your vagina. I was thinking, I love you, the person, and I want to be with you and all the rest. And I fell in love with a person. Okay, I didn't fall in love with an organ. I didn't, fall in love with, you get where I'm going with this, okay? And when 2 men, 2 women, or an opposite sex couple fall in love, they're not really thinking generally about their nether regions, okay? So, but this guy does. He goes, well, the anuses and the vaginas. Wouldn't you want a vagina instead? Okay. Thinking too much about gay sex. So I imagine that this gentleman right here doesn't talk to his wife. He just deals directly only with her vagina. Because he's not seeing them for the people that they are. Think about you who may or may not be involved in a relationship. Think about how often you have sex. Is it all day, every day? No. No, it's probably here and there, this day, that day. You know, it's probably, more than likely, less than 1% of your time, which leaves 99% of your time doing other things with that person. So, for him to say, well, the anus, okay, yikes. All right, so he was suspended from the show, not just for that, but for things that he said about the Jim Crow South. In the interview, he also said that in his Louisiana youth, he picked cotton with African Americans and never saw mistreatment of any black person, not even once. We're going across the field, they're singing, they're happy. I never heard one of them, one black person say, I tell you what, these doggone white people, not a word. So they were very happy in the Jim Crow South. So A&E decided to suspend this guy. And of course, this story has been rapidly changing, and it has started a lot of online groups defending this homophobe have popped up, which is not surprising. These guys are Bible thumpers, self-described Bible thumpers, and they have a show that largely appeals to Southern whites. I'm going to say it. It's that simple. It appeals to Southern whites, okay? So they're not going to lose their audience, and I don't think they're going to lose their show. And today, December 21st, A&E has came out and said, yeah, he's back on the show again. Hopefully all this stuff blows over. This was really interesting to me, though. Listen to this. Scott Gurney is the guy that created Duck Dynasty, the show, not the people themselves, okay? And he starred in a dark homoerotic thriller a number of years back called The Fluffer, where he played a gay-for-pay meth addict who acts in erotic videos. Now, I just think that that's really, it's an interesting and amusing counterpoint, of course, to the remarks that Mr. Robertson made, okay? But not a real big deal as far as I'm concerned. Anybody can do whatever they want, whenever they want. So Mr. Robertson was, and all the people that were supporting him was saying that his free speech was being attacked. First Amendment, no. Fine. He has the First Amendment right to say whatever homophobic and hateful thing that he wants, and he did. And everyone else used their First Amendment right to say what they thought of him. A&E kicked him off the show for a couple of days, apparently. And that is their right as a private for-profit business to make a business decision to take you off the show for just a couple of days. But it is a huge, very popular show, okay? Now, after news spread about the suspension, a lot of people were coming to Mr. Robertson's defense, which included Sarah Palin, because she gets involved in everything. Also, Brian Brown, who is the head of NOM, we'll get to him in a minute, which is the National Organization for Marriage, NOM. And the Westboro Baptist Church came out in defense of Mr. Phil Robertson. And they said, don't back down, duck dude. Yeah, they actually called him that. So when Westboro is coming to your defense, you're doing it wrong. Now let's get to NOM, one of the guys who is Brian Brown from NOM, who's come out in support of Mr. Robertson. Brian Brown visited Russia prior to the homosexual propaganda law being passed in Russia, which of course allows people to be arrested if they show support for the gay community or even if they just show that they're gay. Okay? Brian Brown, an American from NOM, the National Organization of Marriage, went to Russia to help pass that law. Not to be outdone, he then went to Uganda. And in Uganda, a bill has been being tossed around for years. And that bill just finally passed the parliament over in Uganda. And it is a bill that makes it legal to murder homosexuals. You heard that right. It makes it legal to murder gay people. And Brian Brown also went to Uganda to fight for that bill. Rachel Maddow did an interview with this guy, Brian Brown, from NOM, and it was very uncomfortable. She did her best. It was uncomfortable to watch, though, knowing that this man was sitting across from her. Rachel Maddow, who is an out lesbian, and at the time he was in Uganda fighting to pass the kill the gays bill, and he's sitting right across from a gay woman. Now, so the bill's been passed in Uganda, but it's not legal to murder gay people just yet. It has to be signed by their president. So we'll have to see if that happens. And then, of course, Rush Limbaugh came to the defense of Phil Robertson. Of course. So Sarah Palin, Rush Limbaugh, the Westboro Baptist Church, and Brian Brown, the head of NOM, have come to your defense. Phil Robertson, it may seem like you're winning, but trust me, you're not in good company. And you're a homophobe. And you're a racist. And I don't care what anybody thinks about me for saying it, because you simply are. And your kind should not be tolerated. I've had my word. All right. So let's get to RBG, one of my favorite Supreme Court justices. At a forum in Reston, Virginia on Tuesday, she was asked about her retirement, and she said that she has decided to stay on. Now, of course, a lot of people want her to resign because she's up there in years and she's had some health problems recently, and they want her to resign so that Obama can appoint somebody to her spot that'll be progressive and will be able to be on the court for a very long time. She's been in ill health at times, and she's in her 80s, and she has decided that she's going to keep working for as long as she can work. But there's a lot of worry that if the next president is a Republican, of course, he'll put someone Republican into that seat, and then the court is already 5-4 in favor of conservatives. They will be 6-3, and here are some of the things that would be at risk if that were to happen. By the way, I respect Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I respect her decision to want to stay on, and I get what it's like to love the kind of work that you do and not want to leave it. I wish she'd reconsider, though, because let's talk about United States v. Windsor, the decision striking down the unconstitutional DOMA Act. That was a 5-4 decision with Ginsburg in the majority. That could flip the other way. Criminalizing sex, although Lawrence v. Texas was struck down Texas's sodomy laws in a 6-3 decision, one of those 6 justices has been replaced by the staunchly conservative Samuel Alito. If another member of the Lawrence majority is replaced, it could lead to gay sex being outlawed entirely in several states. Of course, Roe v. Wade could be flipped. 4 justices joined a dissent arguing that there's nothing wrong with a wealthy businessman spending $3 million to place a judge on a state's Supreme Court, only to have that judge cast the key vote to overturn a $50 million verdict against the businessman's company. That's right, judges for sale. Ginsburg's replacement could place judges up for sale. And then, of course, the ACA was upheld by the Supreme Court. And if that were flipped, then that would leave, once again, many, many untold millions without health care again. So while we're with that, let's talk about real quick, just some polls on Congress and on the ACA. Americans, of course, are fed up with the inactivity. You can't call it gridlock in Washington because gridlock would suggest that they're trying to do too much. And, of course, in Washington, D.C., they're trying to do as little as possible. Okay? So according to a new poll released by the Pew Research Center, Americans might not like Congress, but they like Republicans in Washington, D.C. even less. So Pew asked the question, if the elections for U.S. Congress were being held today, would you vote for the Republican Party's candidate or the Democratic Party's candidate for Congress in your district? The response showed that 48% of likely voters would choose the Democratic candidate and 44% would side with the Republican. 8% remained undecided. In a similar poll by CNN in October, 50% of those asked would vote for a Democrat, while only 42% were more supportive of the Republican candidate. In a Gallup poll released in November, Congress polled at a record low 9%. I heard as low as 6%. only slightly rising to 12% in the month of December. Digging deeper, a CNN poll from this fall showed that 75% of Americans believe that most Republicans in Congress don't deserve re-election. October was a scary month for the Republican Party and their brand. Reflecting in a Gallup poll that showed the party's 28% approval rating, the lowest approval rating in the 20-year history of Gallup asking the question about the approval of the Republican Party. So Republicans, take that into account when you want to bring us to the brink again and try to crash the economy in February. Just think about it, okay? But I understand the decisions you're making and why you're making them, because of course you're faced with dealing with the Tea Party, who says that the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, who says that Obamacare is just like being raped. Let that soak in for a minute. It's just like being raped. You want some reference? Oh, excuse me. All right. So, Tea Party Nation President Judson Phillips sent out an article written by Darwin Roktansky via email to the Tea Party Nation members. The article begins on reflecting on an episode of Law and Order SVU. Villains who claim that this is on the show, victims who claim that their victims enjoy rape. He then explains that this is an example of Affordable Care Act proponents defending the ACA to their relatives at Thanksgiving dinner. Their message is truly quite simple, he writes. Lie back and quit fighting and you will eventually enjoy the experience. He's talking about the ACA. He continues, but I will encourage you to think about your own families and extend families and decide for yourself if there is a point at which this rape experience could possibly become enjoyable. Rape of our free will, rape of our religious convictions, rape of our free markets, rape of our Constitution, a brutal rape of the American dream, and our personal freedoms. Unquote. Rape, 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 rape. My goodness. The conservatives think so much about gay sex. I don't think gay men think about gay sex as much as conservatives do. Mr. Robertson included. And then, of course, this gentleman who can't stop screaming the word rape. At what point does rape become a pleasurable experience for the victim, and whom among us are not revolted and angered by such nonsense, and whom among us are willing to believe that if we just lay back and don't fight, we will inevitably enjoy it? And the it that I'm talking about is Obamacare, which is just like rape. This is an actual party with money and candidates and a platform. As weird as it is, it's actually happening. This is what passes for discourse in America. But of course, claiming that access to health care is the same as being raped, no one's taking you seriously, really. Okay, so more polls. According to the latest Pew Research Center USA Today poll, Obama's approval rating has finally ended what has been a 5-month dip. Okay. Although his standing is still considerably lower than where it was at the start of the year, the poll showed that 45% of Americans approve of the job that Obama is doing, compared with 49% who disapprove, which is still, to me, a really unfortunate number. While that's lower than the 55% approval rating that Obama boasted in a poll a year ago, it's essentially the same as where it was before the ACA's flawed rollout took a huge political toll on him. In September, before both the government shutdown and the launch of Obamacare, Pew found that 44% approved of Obama while 49% disapproved. Tuesday's poll showed ratings for the ACA also returning to pre-rollout levels. Though the law still remains unpopular, 41% said they approve of the law while 55% said they disapprove. Virtually identical to Pew polls in September, when 42% approved and 53% disapproved. It's perhaps a sign that the political fallout from the law's bumpy launch has abated. Now, there was another poll, and I just want to give you this one for some reference. Another poll released by Quinnipiac University on Tuesday showed that Obama's approval rating hitting a new low of 38%. We're coming up on a deadline for the ACA for people to sign up, and I read a recent article, and forgive me, I don't have it in front of me, but it showed that the ACA is enjoying something like 30, 40,000 people a day are signing up now. It's some crazy number. And I think the president mentioned with the rollout, he said that a lot of people are probably going to wait until the last minute. And that appears to be true, because everybody just ahead of Christmas here is really starting to sign up in a mega huge way. Okay. All right. So as happens every year about this time, ladies and gentlemen, dispatches from the war on Christmas. Christmas is next week. Of course, by the time you're hearing this show, it is the week that you are currently in, unless this show is released on Saturday, of course. And I love talking about the war on Christmas. I used to just roll my eyes, the war on Christmas. Like, oh my gosh, these conservatives and their war on Christmas. But now I laugh about it, and I laugh about it because a lot of people have begun responding in really, really magical ways. Okay, but then some folks have responded in less magical ways, and of course there is no such thing. There is no war on Christmas. But over on the Fox News channel, they're trying to push the idea that anybody who says Happy Holidays is waging war on Christmas. So this takes us to Arizona. A woman said she was recently assaulted while working as a bell ringer for the Salvation Army because she greeted shoppers with the phrase Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. Christina Vindiola told KNXV that she was collecting donations outside of a Walmart in Phoenix and chose the wrong greeting for one woman. The lady looked at me, Vindiola recalled. I thought she was going to put money in the kettle. She came up to me and she said, "Do you believe in God?" And she says, "You're supposed to say Merry Christmas," and then that's when she punched me. Vindiola said that she notified Walmart managers and that the woman had hit her in the arm and the police were notified. She should have just been happy. I said Happy Holidays, but I got hit because I didn't say Merry Christmas. After reviewing the Walmart surveillance video, Phoenix determined that there was not enough evidence to arrest the suspect. Vindiola is considering taking legal action against the woman. Real quick. I say Happy Holidays this time of year. You know why? Because it encompasses all the holidays that come so close at this time of year. But then, when I wake up on Christmas morning and my children begin opening presents and I see my family, I greet them with Merry Christmas. As my children are opening gifts, I say Merry Christmas. But on December 24th, I generally don't say Merry Christmas. On December 13th, I generally don't say Merry Christmas because I don't want people to think that I'm not familiar with a calendar. But I do say it on Christmas. And I'm an atheist. Which brings us to this. The president of a Kentucky creationist museum told Fox News on Monday that Christmas was a time to take on atheists. Let's go. Who used their free speech rights to doubt the existence of God. How dare they? Well, it wouldn't be Christmas without someone complaining about Christ, Fox and Friends host Elizabeth Hasselbeck told Creation Museum President Ken Ham, noting that atheists had put up a billboard in Times Square which suggested that Christ was not needed during Christmas. You know, the atheists, quote, this is a quote, who are a very small minority in the population, have been trying to impose their religion of atheism on the culture for quite a while now, Ham explained. You know, getting Bible prayer out of schools, Christian symbols out of public places. Hey, you're not thinking of atheists, you're thinking of the forefathers who did not want religion and government mixed. They wanted them to be separate. So no prayer in schools, that's what the forefathers wanted. No religious symbolism on public property, that's what the forefathers wanted. Atheists aren't waging war against you. And by the way, the forefathers, a lot of them were atheists or deists, not Christians. Ham said that his group, Answers in Genesis, that's the name of them, had put up its own billboards in Times Square, including one that says, "To all of our atheist friends, thank God you're wrong." My. Oh, must be terrible to be wrong. Our message to the atheists is, hey, we're not attacking you personally, but we want you to know that the truth, that there is a God who created you and you're all sinners, but that God sent his son to become a babe in a manger, which of course, to us atheists, makes perfect sense. We're all sinners, so he sent a babe in a manger. Okay, Great. What they're really doing, the atheists, they're really wanting to impose their anti-God religion on us and our culture. And we need to stand up against that. Hasselbeck concluded by thanking him for standing up for your faith and going up against those bad atheists. It's not true. There's not a war. We don't get together. We don't put on our hats and all the rest and secret handshakes and there's not a war. And for him to complain about how atheists are pushing their beliefs onto him, it's not true. But since you feel that way, since you think that's what's happening, how does it feel, Mr. Ham, to have someone else's beliefs shoved down your throat? Even though in this case they're really not being shoved down your throat. All right. Let's go to Florida. We talked about the Festivus poll that was put up. And because, anyway, okay. So a manger, or excuse me, I think it's a nativity scene went up at the Florida State Capitol building, and then the Festivus people joined in, and they wanted a pole made from beer cans to represent their religion. And then, of course, the atheists stepped in, and they wanted FSM, the flying spaghetti monster, put up there. And so, because they say, hey, you can't put up one for one religion and not put up all these others for all these other religions. And, of course, the flying spaghetti monster, you must remember, at this time of year, he boiled for your sins, okay? And so the Satanists came along, and they said that we want to put something up, too. And the Florida Department of Management Services on Wednesday rejected an application to give floor space at the Capitol building to a New York-based satanic temple. The department's position is that your proposed display is grossly offensive during the holiday season, DMS Administrative Assistant Sherry K. Root told the group. We're at a loss to find what exactly is offensive about our display, Lucian Graves, a spokesman for the temple, told Raw Story. For a display to qualify as grossly offensive, the offending elements should have the quality of being readily obvious to most disinterested viewers. This is not the case. What they want to put up? A 5 by 5 foot poster that the Satanists hope to display showed an angel falling into hell along with a message reading Happy Holidays from the Satanic Temple. The Satanic Temple is now considering its legal options as it awaits clarification from Florida officials. Look, as I mentioned earlier, separation of church and state. So none of these should go up because although we have Christians in this country, we also have Jewish people. We also have atheists. We have all these religions, and you can't represent one religion and not represent them all. And plus, it's a public building. You shouldn't be doing it anyway. Now, I like a lot of the work that the Satanic Temple has been doing. I studied Satanism as a teenager. I never became a part of the religion because if from all the text that you read, it tells you right up front that it's not a religion. Of course, they'll take your money if you want to join, and they'll make you a card-carrying member. But it tells you throughout the text in a lot of the books written by Anton LaVey and Blanche Barton that it's not a religion, So the work that the Satanic Temple has been doing, they recently made headlines for seeking to have a monument erected at the Oklahoma State House. Of course, their response to somebody wanting to put up the Ten Commandments. The group also staged 2 same-sex marriages at the grave of the mother of Westboro Baptist Church founder Fred Phelps. Their message, of course, the mission of the Satanic Temple is to encourage benevolence and empathy among all people, the group said on its website. In addition, we embrace practical common sense justice. As Satanists, we should all be guided by our conscience to undertake noble pursuits guided by our individual wills. We believe that this is the hope of all mankind, and it is the highest aspiration of humanity. Even though they use the word Satan and they call themselves Satanists, they don't actually worship anybody. That was one of the things I really liked about it. It was something that told you, it was a religion that told you, or non-religion, that told you that you're the most important person in the world. But it also tells you you can't hurt animals and you can't hurt children. So when people talk about, the Satanists, they're sacrificing animals and they're killing kids, and actually it's not okay to do that stuff in the satanic religion. If you don't believe me, and the only way I can tell you to read the books, read anything by Anton LaVey, who actually, the Church of Satan didn't start until the 60s. And LaVey was the guy that that started the church. Before that, Satan was just this thing that a lot of churches created in order to get you to turn out the church. And then, of course, Anton LaVey capitalized on it in the 60s. So, but if you read those books, it's not at all what you think it is. But I'm still pretty good with not having a religion. Now to my final thought, and this week it's going to be a quickie. I generally sit down and I look over my news stories, and I throw a little something extra in here at the end, something that is usually prepared and something that at times tends to get pretty emotional. But this time I just want to say to everybody out there, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and this show is now 1 year old. When my friend Kevin mentioned doing this show to me when he found me via Facebook 14 months ago, I had always wanted to do something like this, but wasn't sure how. I didn't have the equipment. I didn't know what it took. I didn't know where to send it or any of the rest or what, so I just never did. So when he found me on Facebook and he mentioned doing it, and of course when the show started, there were three of us on the mic. It was myself, it was him, and it was Angela, and we had a really sweet thing going for a while. And here we are a year later. Kevin is still very much a part of the show. I'm, of course, the main mouthpiece, and all three of us are still friends, and we are trying to set up something to where we can all get on the mic together next week, or at the very least Kevin and myself can get on the mic. I love the fact that I've gotten to do this now, that I get to do this every week, that I get to sit down at this microphone. I've gone really long today. I apologize about that. But I love sitting down at this microphone and sharing these stories that I study all week. First and foremost, because I simply have an interest in it, and second of all, because I really like sharing this kind of information with people, and of course, giving these stories that generally don't get a lot of play, an outlet. So I'm really, really thankful to be doing this. I want to thank Open Sky for their support. My friend and producer Kevin for getting me started on this and giving me this, helping me with this, get this tremendous outlet that I now get to enjoy every single week, and that I hope to get to do for a very long time. And I want to thank you for sticking with me, for listening to the show every week, for downloading it, listening to it on your computer and all the rest, and it's been great, and I really, really hope that the show continues to grow year over year. Okay, I gotta go. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got family that have arrived and all the rest, but we are the fire you can't put out. I want to thank you for your continued support. We will prevail. Just know that. We, the common sense individuals, we will prevail. I will catch you next week. Good day, everybody.